The cafe was alive with warmth and quiet chatter. Soft yellow lights glowed over the wooden tables, and the scent of fresh coffee mixed with the faint aroma of baked pastries. Outside, the city was busy, with people walking fast and cars moving in a rhythmic hum. Inside, however, time seemed to slow down. The place was cozy, filled with people looking for a small escape from their busy day. Some were working on laptops, some were talking quietly, and some were simply enjoying a peaceful moment with a cup of tea or coffee. In the far corner, an old piano stood near the window. Its black and white keys reflected the soft light, slightly worn from years of use. Today, it was more than just an old instrument. It was going to become the heart of the cafe for the evening. A young pianist quietly walked toward it, carrying a small bag with sheet music and a notebook. Their steps were careful, as if each footfall had its own rhythm, blending with the soft hum of the cafe. The pianist had been practicing for years, dreaming of moments like this. Though moments like this always brought a mix of excitement and nerves, setting the bag down, they took a deep breath, their hands brushing over the keys. The touch was gentle, almost reverent, as if greeting an old friend. Customers in the cafe noticed the movement, curiosity stirring. Some turned slightly, wondering if something special was about to happen. Others continued their conversations but could not ignore the quiet presence in the corner. For the pianist, this was not just a performance. It was a conversation with the world. Each key, each note was a word, a feeling waiting to be shared. Sitting down, they opened the sheet music, scanning it quickly, and then closed their eyes for a brief moment, feeling the energy of the room. The cafe was not a concert hall, but it had its own life, its own rhythm, and the pianist wanted to match it, to merge with the everyday sounds and turn them into something magical. The first notes came softly, almost like a whisper. The melody was simple, a gentle tune that did not demand attention but slowly captured it. A man reading a newspaper paused, tilting his head, letting the sound reach him. A woman at a nearby table stopped stirring her coffee, listening as the keys spoke. Even the clinking of cups and the hum of conversation seemed to quiet down, blending into the background of the music. It was subtle at first, but the effect was noticeable. The cafe felt different, as if the air itself had become part of the melody. The pianist's fingers moved with grace, touching each note with care. There was a rhythm that seemed natural, flowing from the heart rather than just the fingers. The music was not rushed or forced. It grew slowly, drawing people in without demanding it. A small group of friends at a table looked up, surprised by the beauty of the sound. One of them whispered to the others, pointing toward the pianist, and they nodded, their expressions showing a shared feeling of wonder. The notes began to form patterns, rising and falling like gentle waves. Each chord carried a hint of emotion, a story without words. The pianist felt the room responding, the way some people leaned forward, the way others closed their eyes and let the sound wrap around them. For a moment, the pianist forgot about the nervousness, the thoughts of whether they were good enough. It was just the music, the piano, and the people who were listening. A young child sat with their parents near the counter, fidgeting at first, but then slowing down as the melody reached them. Tiny fingers tapped on the table, trying to follow the rhythm, innocent and untrained but perfectly in tune with the mood. The pianist noticed and smiled softly, letting the music carry a lighter, playful touch in that moment. Music was not just about precision, it was about connection, and even the smallest gestures mattered. Outside, the city lights began to twinkle as the evening grew darker. Inside, the cafe became a small sanctuary where time felt suspended. The music filled every corner, touching faces and hearts without a single word spoken. Regular customers who had been coming for years noticed something different today. It was not just the piano. It was the way it was played. The care, the feeling, the story behind each note. Some thought about memories long past, some about dreams they were chasing, and some simply felt a quiet joy that was hard to describe. The pianist's hands moved with growing confidence. Each note seemed to build upon the last, creating layers of sound that were both complex and easy to listen to. There was a balance between technical skill and emotion, a blend that made the music feel alive. It was not flashy or showy, but it had power in its simplicity. People started noticing small details, the way the pianist's eyes closed when lost in the music, the slight sway of the body, the gentle smiles that appeared when a perfect chord rang out. These details made the performance feel human, authentic, real. A man at the back sitting alone had a thoughtful look on his face. He had been having a hard day, dealing with stress and worries, but the music seemed to take some of the weight away. He closed his eyes, allowing the sound to reach him, and for a few minutes the world outside the cafe disappeared. A group of students nearby who had come in after a long day at university looked at each other and nodded, impressed by the talent they were witnessing unexpectedly. No one had asked for this performance, yet it was exactly what everyone needed in that moment. The pianist switched to a slightly faster section, still keeping the softness but adding energy. Fingers moved nimbly, yet there was still a grace to the motion, a storytelling in every gesture. The cafe felt alive in a new way. Conversations resumed, but quietly, with smiles and whispers acknowledging the beauty unfolding. People who had arrived stressed or tired seemed lighter now, carried along by the rhythm. Some watched in awe, wondering how someone could make an old piano sound so fresh, so meaningful. The music had a way of speaking to each person differently. A couple sitting near the window held hands, letting the melody remind them of their first meeting. An elderly woman in the corner quietly nodded, remembering someone she had lost long ago. A young man at the counter took a deep breath, feeling the inspiration to start something new in his life. The pianist was unaware of each story, but the awareness of its effect made the performance even more personal. Music, after all, was meant to be shared, to touch hearts in ways words sometimes could not. The first part of the performance was slow, reflective, almost meditative. Each note was given space, allowing listeners to feel the emotion behind it. There were moments of silence in between chords, creating anticipation, drawing everyone in. Even those who had only come to grab a quick coffee found themselves staying longer, captivated. The pianist felt a subtle connection, a thread linking everyone in the room through sound. It was not about applause yet. It was about presence, attention, and emotion. As the last few notes of this initial melody faded, there was a quiet pause. The room seemed to hold its breath as if reluctant to break the spell. The pianist lifted their hands slightly, feeling the resonance in the air, savoring the moment. Eyes opened, glances exchanged, some smiles shy, some warm, all carrying appreciation without a single word spoken. The cafe had become a shared space of emotion, a place where ordinary life met something extraordinary for a little while. For the pianist, this was only the beginning. The nerves had settled, replaced by a gentle excitement, a desire to continue exploring this connection. They knew the music would grow, become richer, and reach deeper parts of everyone listening. But in this first part, they had already achieved something important. The room had paused, listened, and felt. The piano was not just an instrument. It was a bridge, and the audience had crossed it willingly. As the pianist looked up briefly, noticing faces filled with curiosity, wonder, and quiet joy, a sense of calm pride settled in. This was the reason for years of practice, countless hours of dedication and moments of doubt. The music was not about showing off talent. It was about sharing a piece of the soul, and in this moment it had succeeded. The cafe continued its gentle hum around them, cups clinking, coffee steaming, lights glowing warmly, but at the center, the piano had created its own world, a world where every person present had become part of a shared story. However briefly, the first part of the evening was done, but the journey had just begun. Listeners shifted slightly in their seats, leaning in a little closer, anticipating what would come next. Some whispered quietly about the beauty they were hearing. Some simply smiled, lost in thought. The pianist took a breath, feeling the rhythm of the cafe, the pulse of the audience, and the quiet satisfaction that comes from touching hearts without a single word. The connection was real, human, and deeply moving. And in that moment, the cafe, the piano, the pianist, and the audience were all part of the same story, sharing something rare and unforgettable. As the first melody faded into the gentle hum of the cafe, the audience felt a subtle shift. What had begun as quiet curiosity had grown into quiet fascination. The pianist, sensing the room's attention, allowed a small smile to appear and adjusted their posture, preparing for the next piece. Fingers hovered over the keys for a brief moment, gathering energy and focus. The music was about to deepen, to pull listeners further into a world they had not expected when they entered the cafe. The second piece started softly, almost cautiously, as if testing the waters. It was a more complex tune than the first, with subtle variations in rhythm and tone. The audience immediately noticed the difference. People who had been simply curious now leaned forward, trying to catch every nuance. The pianist's hands moved with growing confidence, each note deliberate, each chord shaped with care. It was clear that the music was not just skillful but intentional, filled with thought and emotion. Among the listeners, an elderly man with a walking stick sat near the window, tapping his fingers lightly on the table in time with the music. He had come to the cafe out of habit, seeking a quiet cup of coffee, but now he was captivated. His eyes, bright despite the wrinkles of age, followed the pianist's movements closely. Memories seemed to flicker across his face, stories unspoken stirred by the music. He smiled faintly, remembering moments long past. Moments of love, joy, and even sorrow, all intertwined with the gentle rise and fall of the melody. A young woman at another table had her laptop closed, forgotten for the moment. She rested her chin in her hands, completely absorbed. The complexity of the tune fascinated her. She could hear the technical mastery, the careful balance of speed and softness. But it was the emotion underneath that held her attention. Each note seemed to speak to her personally, unlocking feelings she hadn't realized were there. Her eyes glistened slightly, not from sadness, but from the beauty of the connection she felt with something larger than herself. The pianist continued to play, moving seamlessly between chords and intricate passages. The music was alive, shifting between moments of tension and release, lifting spirits and gently tugging at hearts. The audience responded in subtle ways, a breath held, a head tilted, a hand pressed over the chest. It was as if the room itself had become part of the performance, each person contributing to the atmosphere, each reaction adding to the energy. The pianist noticed the subtle smiles, the quiet sighs, and the attentive faces. It gave a sense of purpose, a feeling that this music was more than notes. It was a conversation, a shared human experience. A small child sitting with their mother looked up at the pianist with wide eyes. The child's curiosity was uncontainable. Tiny hands began to tap along on the table, mimicking the rhythm, creating their own little harmony. The mother laughed softly, gently guiding the child back to their seat but letting the music continue to inspire. The pianist, sensing the small gesture, added a playful trill, lightening the mood without breaking the continuity of the piece. It was a subtle acknowledgement of the audience, a reminder that music could touch all ages and all walks of life. Across the cafe, a group of friends who had been quietly chatting now exchanged glances and smiles. The music had captured their attention, drawing them together in silent admiration. One of them whispered to another, "I didn't expect this when I walked in," and the other nodded, eyes still fixed on the pianist. The sense of shared experience was growing. Everyone, regardless of age or background, was feeling something profound, even if they could not articulate it. The second piece grew bolder. Notes rose in a gentle crescendo, filling the room with a richness that seemed to vibrate in the air. It was intricate yet accessible, technical yet emotional. The pianist's fingers danced over the keys, moving with both precision and freedom. Each chord struck was like a word in a story. Each pause a breath, each flourish a feeling. It was a performance that demanded attention not through volume or speed, but through sincerity and depth. At the back of the cafe, a man had entered late, but the moment he stepped inside, he was drawn immediately to the music. He paused, coat in hand, listening. His normally hurried steps slowed, and he found a seat near the counter, captivated by the piano. The music seemed to reach across space, inviting newcomers into the shared experience. Even strangers who had just walked in were instantly part of this moment, caught by the beauty of something genuine and heartfelt. The pianist's eyes occasionally lifted, scanning the room subtly, acknowledging the faces and the reactions. There was no need for words. The connection was felt. People were not just hearing the music, they were living it. A couple sitting close to the window held hands tighter, letting the notes speak where words could not. An older woman at the far corner dabbed at her eyes, moved quietly by the resonance of the melody. A young man at the counter straightened his posture, as if reminded of dreams he had set aside, feeling a quiet spark of motivation. The music shifted again, slower this time, deeper and more reflective. The pianist allowed the keys to breathe, letting each note linger just long enough to sink in. The audience felt the shift, leaning in instinctively. It was a moment of intimacy where the room became small, focused, almost sacred. Conversations were now completely paused. The cafe, usually filled with background noise, had become a chamber of shared emotion, where everyone was present not just in body but in feeling. A barista who had been cleaning tables paused for a moment, leaning against the counter to watch. She had seen many musicians come and go, but there was something unique in this performance. It was not just talent, it was authenticity. Every movement, every note carried intention. She felt a warmth spreading through her, a connection she could not explain but understood deeply. The piano was not just music. It was a bridge, linking strangers in the cafe together through a universal language of feeling. As the piece progressed, the pianist's skill became more apparent. Fingers moved swiftly when needed, lightly when required, balancing technical proficiency with emotional resonance. It was clear that this was not just practice, it was storytelling. The music seemed to have its own voice, rising and falling like a narrative, with tension, release, and moments of quiet reflection. The audience followed, swept along by the ebb and flow of emotion, becoming part of the journey even if they could not name it. The younger patrons began to notice the subtle details in the performance. The way the pianist's wrists rolled slightly, the way the shoulders moved in gentle rhythm, the small, almost imperceptible nods at moments of complexity. It was artistry in motion, human and imperfect, yet perfect in its effect. Some began to whisper quietly to each other, commenting on the beauty, the skill, and the emotion. The murmurs were not disruptive, they were part of the atmosphere, small acknowledgments of shared admiration. A man sitting alone, usually reserved and quiet, felt a stirring inside him. He had been coming to this cafe for months, using it as a place to work, to escape, to be alone. But now he felt part of something larger. The music had opened a door, connecting him to strangers, to a story being told without words. He leaned back slightly, closing his eyes, allowing himself to be carried by the melody. It was rare to feel this sense of connection, and he savored it fully. The second piece reached its conclusion with a gentle, lingering chord. The notes slowly faded, leaving a quiet resonance in the air. The audience held their breath for a moment, caught in the lingering echo. Even after the music stopped, the feeling remained, filling the room with a sense of calm, satisfaction, and quiet wonder. Some looked around at each other, sharing a smile, a nod, or a small laugh, acknowledging the impact of what they had just experienced. The pianist's hands rested lightly on the keys, letting the moment sink in. There was a deep satisfaction in knowing that the music had reached the audience, that it had touched them in ways beyond simple listening. The cafe returned to its normal background noises slowly, the clinking of cups, quiet murmurs, and soft laughter. But the energy had shifted. Something had changed. Everyone present had shared a small miracle, a moment of emotional resonance that would linger long after they left. The pianist allowed themselves a small smile, feeling a quiet pride and an even deeper motivation. The first piece had introduced the mood, captured attention. The second had drawn the listeners in, weaving them into a story that was both personal and shared. And now, as they prepared for the next section, they knew that the audience was ready, open, and attentive. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, unspoken yet palpable. People shifted slightly, settling into their seats, some leaning forward, others closing their eyes in anticipation. Even the barista, who had returned to work, stole glances at the pianist, curious about what would come next. The child who had tapped along before now sat quietly, absorbed, perhaps waiting to be surprised. Every face in the room carried a sense of expectation, the quiet excitement of being part of something beautiful and fleeting. The pianist took a deep breath, feeling the rhythm of the cafe, the pulse of the audience, and the lingering energy of the last piece. Fingers hovered above the keys, ready to start the next melody, a piece that would be more expressive, more challenging, and more emotional. They could feel it building inside, the story waiting to be told. And as the pianist started the next piece with a subtle shift in tone, a quiet intensity that immediately captured the attention of everyone in the cafe. The melody was richer now, filled with layers that demanded focus and patience. Fingers moved with precision but also with emotion, each note carrying meaning beyond its sound. The audience leaned in instinctively, drawn to the complexity and beauty unfolding before them. The cafe, once just a casual gathering place, now felt like a stage, alive with anticipation and energy. The music grew in depth, and with it, the emotions of the listeners shifted. An elderly woman at a corner table brushed her hand across her eyes, not from sadness but from the sheer poignancy of the notes. Memories seemed to flow through her mind, connecting past and present in a quiet, unspoken dialogue. She smiled faintly, letting herself be carried by the music. Nearby, a young man closed his laptop, leaning forward in his chair, fully immersed. The notes seemed to speak directly to him, reminding him of dreams and aspirations he had almost forgotten in the rush of daily life. The pianist's hands moved with increasing confidence and agility. Each chord resonated deeply, filling the room with a sense of richness and warmth. The melody shifted from soft and tender to bold and expressive, capturing both tension and release. The audience felt this movement instinctively. Some swayed slightly in their seats, others closed their eyes, allowing the music to carry them through its emotional landscape. Even the staff behind the counter paused, captivated by the beauty of the unfolding performance. At a table near the window, a small child pressed their hands against the glass, mesmerized by the sound. The rhythm was playful at moments, prompting tiny finger taps on the table, as if the child were creating their own music alongside the pianist. Their mother smiled quietly, enjoying the innocent connection the child had with the melody. The pianist, sensing the light-hearted energy, allowed a gentle, lively flourish to weave into the piece, acknowledging the presence of the youngest listener without breaking the flow. The music grew more complex, showcasing the pianist's technical skill alongside the emotional depth. Rapid arpeggios and flowing scales intertwined with softer melodic passages, creating a sense of motion and life. The audience followed along, some with awe, others with curiosity, but all fully engaged. Conversations were completely paused. Even the background noises of the café seemed to recede, replaced by the living rhythm of the piano. Each person became a participant in the performance, feeling the story unfold as if it were their own. A man sitting at the back, usually reserved and quiet, found himself leaning forward, caught in the swell of the melody. He had been carrying worries from the day, tensions from work, but for these few moments the music allowed him to breathe, to release, to feel a sense of peace. Across the room, a young woman tapped her pen absent-mindedly on her notebook, inspired by the complexity of the notes. She had been struggling with writer's block, but the flow of the music stirred her creativity, reminding her of the power of patience, practice, and presence. The pianist continued to navigate the melody with skill and sensitivity. Each shift in tempo or volume was deliberate, intended to evoke a particular emotion or thought. The audience responded in subtle ways: a slight lean forward, a soft hum of appreciation, a whispered conversation acknowledging the beauty. The café had become a vessel for shared emotion, where each listener felt both unique and connected. It was a rare experience, the kind that stayed with a person long after the music ended. The child near the counter had begun tapping a small rhythm on the edge of the table, fully caught up in the motion of the piece. Their laughter rang out quietly as a playful passage came through, causing others around them to smile. The pianist added a delicate trilling note, a small acknowledgement of the lightheartedness, a human touch to balance the complexity of the music. The interplay between skill and feeling created a dynamic, living atmosphere, one that made everyone in the room feel both calm and energized at the same time. In the middle of the piece, there was a moment of tension. The music slowed, keys held longer, the notes deep and resonant. The pianist's fingers hovered, almost hesitant, then moved with precision, releasing the tension into a soft, flowing resolution. The audience sensed the emotion behind the technical shift, feeling a wave of relief and admiration. Some clasped their hands together, some exhaled quietly, but all were present in the shared experience. It was a reminder of the human quality behind the performance, the delicate balance between control and vulnerability. A couple sitting near the window exchanged glances, their hands resting lightly together. The melody seemed to echo the feelings they had for each other, subtle and complex yet simple and sincere. They smiled quietly, appreciating the beauty of the moment and the reminder of connection in their own lives. Nearby, a group of students who had come in casually for coffee now sat silently, impressed by the pianist's skill and moved by the depth of feeling. Whispers of admiration floated quietly through the café, gentle acknowledgement without disturbing the ongoing magic. The pianist's expression was one of focus and calm determination. Eyes occasionally lifted to scan the room, taking in the audience's reactions and then returned to the keys. The connection was subtle but real. Every note played was received and interpreted by the listeners in their own way. The music was a conversation, a bridge between the performer and the audience, one that transcended words. The cafe had transformed from a place of ordinary routine to a space of shared emotion and storytelling, even in the absence of dialogue. As the piece reached its climax, the music surged with intensity, fingers flying over the keys with energy and grace. The chords were full, resonant, enveloping the entire room. The audience leaned in, absorbed completely, feeling the culmination of emotion and skill. Even those who had been distracted by daily thoughts were now fully present. It was as if the music had drawn out a collective breath, uniting everyone in the cafe for a few rare, beautiful minutes. The pianist carefully guided the music through its final passage, balancing speed and softness, complexity and clarity. Every chord struck was meaningful, every pause intentional. The crescendo slowly dissipated, fading into a softer, lingering set of notes. The room seemed to hold its breath, savoring the last echoes. People sat quietly, eyes closed or staring in quiet wonder, reluctant to break the spell. The music had reached a peak of both technical brilliance and emotional impact, leaving everyone changed in subtle, personal ways. A young man near the counter exhaled quietly, feeling a sense of awe he had not anticipated. A woman at a nearby table whispered softly to her friend, describing the feeling as magical, unexplainable but powerful. Even the staff behind the counter, accustomed to background music in cafes, paused and watched for a brief moment, silently appreciating the beauty. The performance had drawn everyone into a shared moment of human connection, where the ordinary routines of life were suspended, replaced by something deeper and more meaningful. The pianist allowed their hands to rest lightly on the keys, savoring the resonance that lingered in the air. They felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing the audience had been engaged, moved, and inspired. This was more than just playing notes, it was storytelling, emotional sharing, and connection. The cafe had become a canvas, the piano a brush, and the audience participants in a living work of art. As the last echo of the melody faded, the room returned slowly to normal. The hum of conversation resumed, cups clinked, and the soft murmurs of appreciation filled the air. But the energy had shifted. People carried a sense of having witnessed something rare, something beautiful and human. Faces glowed with quiet smiles, eyes reflected emotion, and hearts felt a subtle uplift. The pianist, observing the reactions, felt a deep sense of purpose and fulfillment. The music had bridged gaps, created bonds, and left a mark on everyone present. The first two pieces had set the stage and captured attention, but this third performance had deepened the connection, drawing the audience into a more emotional, intricate journey. The pianist took a brief pause, allowing a moment of stillness, sensing the readiness of the audience for what would come next. There was anticipation, a shared understanding that the evening was far from over, and that more stories were waiting to be told through the keys. People shifted slightly in their seats, some leaning forward, others closing their eyes in preparation. The child near the counter smiled quietly, waiting for the next melody. Friends exchanged small whispers, speculating about what would come next. Even those who had been quiet and reserved seemed to carry an unspoken excitement. The pianist felt the energy, the quiet eagerness, and the anticipation built a subtle tension in the room, making it clear that the journey was far from complete. The final note of this piece lingered in the air, a soft, resonant sound that seemed to stretch the moment, and as the pianist lifted their hands slightly from the keys, the audience remained still, holding on to the emotion, waiting, sensing that the next part of the evening would carry them even further into the depths of the music, into stories yet to be told and feelings yet to be shared. The pianist paused for a moment, letting the silence in the cafe speak. The soft hum of conversation had returned, but the energy was different now. The audience had been drawn in emotionally and mentally, and they were ready for the next journey the music would take them on. Fingers hovered over the keys, feeling the cool touch and the worn texture of the piano. Each key held a memory, a possibility, and a story waiting to be told. The next melody began quietly, almost as if whispering to the room. It was slower, more deliberate, each note measured and rich with emotion. The audience leaned in instinctively, drawn by the depth and nuance of the music. The pianist's hands moved gracefully, expressing feeling in every chord, every flourish. It was not just about playing notes. It was about conveying a message, a shared understanding of the human experience. The café seemed to shrink, becoming an intimate space filled with emotion, where each person felt personally addressed by the music. A young woman sitting near the center closed her eyes, letting the melody wash over her. She felt the subtle shifts in tempo, the rise and fall of each phrase, and it reminded her of the small, quiet moments in life that often go unnoticed. Memories of walks in the park, gentle rain tapping on windows, and heartfelt conversations came flooding back. She smiled faintly, grateful for the way the music connected with her own experiences. Nearby, a man sipping coffee tilted his head slightly, absorbing the emotional depth, feeling an unexpected warmth spread through him. The pianist's fingers moved with precision and emotion. Each note was a bridge connecting the performer to the listeners. The music carried layers of complexity, yet it remained approachable, gentle, and deeply human. The audience responded with subtle gestures, leaning forward, nodding slightly, closing eyes, or letting a small sigh escape. The atmosphere was charged not with noise or excitement, but with quiet attention and connection. Everyone was present, fully immersed, and aware of the shared experience. An elderly couple near the window held hands, letting the melody remind them of their own history together. The music seemed to echo their long journey, the joys and challenges they had faced, and the enduring bond that remained. They glanced at each other, sharing a smile, feeling seen by the music in a way that words could not convey. Across the room, a student sat with notebook open but untouched, inspired by the ebb and flow of the notes. Thoughts and ideas stirred within them, awakened by the emotional intensity of the performance. The pianist added subtle variations, moving between softer, reflective passages and gentle, more animated sections. Each transition was seamless, guiding the audience through a journey of emotion. Some listeners felt the melancholy of certain chords, while others found comfort in the warmth of the harmonies. The balance between technical skill and emotional expression was clear, and the audience responded intuitively. Some fingers tapped lightly on the tables, some heads tilted in appreciation, and a few even hummed quietly, absorbed in the music. At a corner table, a child who had been quietly watching the pianist began to hum along softly, following the melody in their own innocent way. Their parents smiled, letting them enjoy the moment. The pianist, noticing the child's engagement, added a gentle, playful trill in response, creating a subtle dialogue between performer and listener. This small interaction highlighted the human aspect of the performance, the way music can create connections across ages and experiences. The piece gradually became more expressive. The pianist's hands moved faster at times, creating waves of sound that rose and fell with emotional intensity. The audience felt these shifts, some leaning forward, others closing their eyes, letting the music carry them along. A man sitting at the counter, who had appeared distracted earlier, was now completely absorbed, letting go of the stress and worries that had followed him into the café. The music seemed to lift something heavy from him, leaving a quiet sense of peace in its place. The pianist maintained a delicate balance, ensuring that the technical complexity never overshadowed the emotional impact. Each passage, each chord progression was designed to tell a story, to invite the listeners to become part of the narrative. The audience responded in kind, their attention unwavering. Even the staff, usually busy with orders and cleaning, found themselves stopping to listen, drawn into the shared moment. The café had transformed from a casual gathering place into a space of communal emotional experience. A couple sitting near the center exchanged quiet words, though neither wanted to interrupt the music. They nodded to each other, understanding the significance of the moment, feeling the subtle messages in the melody. Nearby, a student quietly jotted down a few lines of inspiration, grateful for the unexpected spark the performance had provided. The music was not just entertainment. It was a conversation, a connection, and a reminder of the power of art to touch lives. As the melody continued, it moved through contrasting sections, soft and reflective one moment, expressive and passionate the next. The pianist's control and sensitivity were evident, guiding the audience through the emotional highs and lows. The room responded organically, breaths held during tense passages, soft exhalations during moments of resolution. The performance had created a living dialogue, a shared journey that required no words, only presence and attention. At a table near the window, an older man closed his eyes, letting the music transport him back to moments of youth, love, and adventure. He smiled faintly, remembering experiences long past, feeling grateful for the emotions the music evoked. Across the room, a young woman quietly clasped her hands, letting the melody remind her of the importance of hope and resilience. Each listener was interpreting the performance personally, yet collectively, they were experiencing the same shared moment of beauty and connection. The pianist gradually built the piece toward a climax, the notes rising in intensity, then cascading gently, creating a sense of movement and momentum. The audience responded instinctively, drawn into the ebb and flow of the music. Subtle expressions of awe, quiet sighs, and attentive posture filled the room. The cafe had become a place of quiet reverence, where each person felt included in the journey being told through the piano. In the middle of the piece, the pianist allowed a pause, a moment of stillness that hung in the air like a held breath. The audience leaned into this silence, feeling the weight of anticipation. Then, with a gentle flourish, the music resumed, richer and more expressive, carrying the listeners further into the emotional landscape. It was a reminder of the human qualities behind the performance, the control, the vulnerability, the care, and the intention that transformed simple notes into shared experiences. The child near the counter giggled softly, responding to a playful passage in the music. Their laughter added a lightness to the atmosphere, reminding everyone that joy and innocence were part of the shared experience. The pianist responded subtly, allowing the melody to include gentle, whimsical touches without losing the overall emotional depth. This interplay between performer and audience highlighted the human-centered nature of the experience, where connection and response were as important as skill and technique. The piece moved through its final passages with grace and sensitivity. The pianist guided the melody with care, ensuring that each note was felt, each chord resonated. The audience responded, some leaning forward, some closing their eyes, some sitting in quiet reflection. The cafe seemed to hold its collective breath, fully present in the moment. Even as the music began to slow, the energy in the room remained palpable, a testament to the depth of connection achieved. As the final notes faded, the audience remained still for a moment, savoring the resonance. Some whispered softly to each other, sharing their appreciation, while others simply sat quietly, letting the experience settle in. The pianist allowed their hands to rest lightly on the keys, feeling the lingering energy in the room. There was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that the music had reached the audience, touched their hearts, and created a shared human experience. The cafe returned gradually to its normal rhythm, yet the air remained charged with the memory of the performance. People shifted slightly, adjusting in their seats, but the sense of connection lingered. Smiles and glances were exchanged, acknowledging the shared journey they had just experienced. The pianist took a deep breath, feeling a sense of fulfillment and anticipation. The first pieces had introduced the mood and deepened the connection. Now, as the evening continued, the audience was ready for the next chapter, for a performance that would reach even further into their emotions and imaginations. The anticipation was quiet but unmistakable. The audience was ready, alert, and eager for the next melody. The pianist could feel it, a subtle energy that moved through the cafe, unspoken but palpable. They prepared for the next piece, one that would challenge, inspire, and move both the performer and the audience to new heights of connection. The evening was far from over, and the journey through sound, emotion, and human connection was only just beginning. The pianist took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the cafe and the quiet energy of the audience. They began the next piece slowly, with a soft touch that immediately drew everyone's attention. The melody was gentle at first, but it carried a depth of emotion that was impossible to ignore. Each note was deliberate and rich, resonating through the room. People leaned forward in their chairs, listening intently, letting the music wash over them. The audience was fully immersed now. An elderly woman sitting near the corner closed her eyes, feeling memories stirring as the melody unfolded. She smiled faintly, thinking of moments long past, of laughter and love and quiet evenings. Nearby, a young man who had been restless now leaned in, absorbed by the intricate patterns of the music. The pianist's fingers moved with elegance, dancing across the keys, creating waves of sound that lifted and sank, carrying the listeners on an emotional journey. A small child sat with their parent, tapping along to the rhythm, giggling quietly at a playful trill. The parent watched fondly, letting the child enjoy the music without interruption. The pianist, noticing the playful energy, added a subtle, light-hearted passage as if responding directly to the child's joy. It was a reminder of the human connection that music can create, how even the smallest gestures can be part of a shared experience. The piece grew more expressive. The pianist shifted between delicate, tender passages and more powerful, resonant chords. Each movement carried intention, each note spoke with feeling. The audience reacted in quiet ways. A soft exhale here, a nod there, a brief smile shared with a neighbor. The cafe had transformed into a space of shared emotion, where people were not just hearing the music but feeling it deeply, individually and collectively. A couple near the window held hands, letting the melody echo their own story. The music seemed to speak to them, uniting their memories and emotions with the sounds filling the room. Across the cafe, a group of friends who had come in casually for coffee now sat silently, captivated by the beauty unfolding before them. The pianist's skill and emotion created a bond among strangers, a quiet understanding that transcended words. The melody became more intense, flowing with energy and movement. The pianist's fingers flew over the keys, demonstrating both technical mastery and emotional depth. The audience responded instinctively, leaning forward, closing their eyes, or simply sitting in quiet awe. The cafe was alive with subtle energy, a shared human experience that filled the space without a single word spoken. At the back of the cafe, a man who had appeared distracted earlier now sat fully engaged. His worries seemed to melt away with each note, replaced by a sense of calm and wonder. A young woman nearby clasped her hands lightly, inspired and moved by the performance. The pianist's music was reaching people in different ways, touching each heart uniquely, creating personal connections that were both profound and silent. The pianist maintained a careful balance, blending complex technical passages with emotionally resonant melodies. The music swelled and softened, creating a dynamic rhythm that carried the listeners through highs and lows. Each chord, each pause, each trill was purposeful, creating a story that unfolded with grace and subtlety. The audience responded naturally, their engagement reflected in their posture, expressions, and quiet attentiveness. A young boy at a corner table whispered softly to his mother, his wide eyes filled with wonder. She smiled and nodded, letting him enjoy the magic of the moment. The pianist's hands danced over the keys, creating a dialogue with the audience that was intimate and personal, human and real. Even those who had arrived thinking they would simply drink coffee and leave were now caught in the spell of the performance, completely absorbed in the shared emotional experience. The music moved through a series of crescendos, each one building anticipation and intensity. The pianist's fingers moved swiftly and confidently, expressing feeling and skill in equal measure. The audience felt the rising energy, leaning forward, holding their breath, letting the music carry them. The cafe seemed to pulse with the sound, every note vibrating through the air, connecting everyone present in a quiet, powerful way. The pianist shifted the melody to a softer, more reflective tone. The room responded with a quiet attentiveness, sensing the contrast and the emotional depth of the performance. A young woman closed her eyes, imagining the stories behind the music, letting herself be carried by the ebb and flow of the notes. An older man leaned back slightly, a gentle smile on his face, letting memories and feelings surface with the music. The child at the counter began humming softly along with the melody, their voice blending unconsciously with the piano. The pianist added a delicate flourish, playful and light, acknowledging the presence of the young listener. This small human interaction added warmth to the room, reminding everyone that music could touch hearts of all ages. The audience responded instinctively, some smiling, some leaning in, all participating in the emotional journey without words. The piece became more intense again, reaching its peak with powerful chords and rapid passages. The pianist's hands moved with precision, yet every note was infused with emotion. The audience was fully captivated, leaning forward, eyes wide, hearts open. The cafe had become a space of shared experience, where everyone was connected through the music, feeling the highs and lows, the subtle nuances, and the beauty of the performance. At a table near the window, a couple shared a quiet look, their hands clasped tightly. The music spoke to them in a way that words could not, evoking memories and emotions they had long held inside. Nearby, a young man closed his eyes, feeling inspiration and hope rising within him. Across the room, friends exchanged smiles, acknowledging the beauty and skill of the performance. The pianist's music had united them all in a common emotional space, a rare and profound connection. The melody began to soften, slowing down gradually. The pianist's fingers lingered on certain keys, allowing the notes to resonate fully, filling the room with a gentle warmth. The audience felt the change, some leaning back, some closing their eyes, letting the music settle in their hearts. The energy in the cafe was calm yet charged, a quiet aftermath of the emotional journey that had unfolded. The pianist's expression was one of focus and fulfillment. Each note had been played with intention, each chord chosen carefully to convey emotion. The audience's reactions, subtle yet meaningful, reflected the connection that had been created. The music had reached deep into the hearts of the listeners, leaving an impression that would linger long after the evening ended. It was a testament to the human-centered nature of performance, where emotion, skill, and empathy combined to create something truly memorable. The final passages of the piece were delicate, a gentle conclusion that allowed the audience to absorb the full depth of the experience. The pianist's hands moved lightly, guiding the melody to a peaceful end. The last note lingered in the air, a soft echo that seemed to wrap the room in quiet reflection. The audience remained still for a moment, savoring the resonance and the emotions stirred by the performance. Whispers of admiration began to circulate quietly, acknowledging the skill and the impact of the music. Some nodded to each other, sharing a sense of wonder and appreciation. A young woman smiled at a friend, whispering about how deeply she had been moved. The child at the counter clapped softly, their innocent joy a sweet punctuation to the performance. The pianist allowed a gentle smile to appear, sensing the connection and fulfillment that comes from touching hearts through music. The cafe slowly returned to its normal rhythm, yet the atmosphere had shifted. The shared experience left a lasting impression on everyone present. People moved with a lightness in their step, smiles lingering, hearts quietly uplifted. The pianist felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that the music had succeeded in creating a moment of connection, emotion, and shared humanity. The performance had reached a climax, capturing both technical skill and emotional resonance. It had drawn the audience fully into a journey of feeling, reflection, and connection. Now, as the pianist rested their hands lightly on the keys, there was a sense of quiet anticipation for the next chapter. The audience, having been moved deeply, was ready for the final part of the evening, the piece that would leave a lasting impression and complete the emotional arc of the performance. The energy in the cafe was calm, yet expectant. People adjusted in their seats, some leaning forward, others closing their eyes in quiet anticipation. Even the staff paused briefly, sensing the significance of what had been experienced and what was still to come. The pianist felt the collective focus, the quiet readiness of the audience, and prepared for the final piece, knowing it would be the culmination of an evening filled with emotion, skill, and shared human experience. The final notes of this section lingered, leaving the room in a state of quiet reflection. The audience was attentive, moved, and connected, fully engaged in the human-centered experience that had been created. The pianist took a deep breath, feeling the energy and connection in the room, and prepared for the climactic finale, ready to lead the audience through the final emotional journey of the evening. The pianist took a steady breath, feeling the anticipation of the audience in the quiet cafe. The final piece was about to begin, the culmination of an evening that had already taken everyone on a journey of emotion, skill, and connection. Fingers hovered over the keys, then gently pressed down to release the first notes. The melody was soft, inviting, like a conversation that had been building throughout the evening. The audience leaned forward, fully present, their attention focused on each movement, each sound. The music began slowly, with delicate notes that seemed to float in the air. Each chord carried weight and meaning, resonating with the listeners in a deeply personal way. A woman near the window closed her eyes, letting the melody guide her thoughts and emotions. She felt memories and dreams intertwine with the music, creating a private yet shared experience. Across the room, a young man rested his chin on his hand, absorbing the subtle shifts in tone and rhythm, feeling a sense of calm he had not expected. The pianist's hands moved with both precision and emotion, weaving complex patterns with ease. The music shifted gently, sometimes lingering softly, other times moving more swiftly, creating a dynamic flow that kept the audience engaged. The cafe had become a space of quiet connection, where strangers shared a common experience, bound together by the sound of the piano. Every listener interpreted the music personally, yet collectively they were united in appreciation and feeling. A child at a corner table tapped a small rhythm on the edge of the table, giggling softly. Their parents smiled, letting them enjoy the music without interruption. The pianist, aware of the presence of the young listener, added a playful note, light and whimsical, creating a moment of joy that rippled through the room. Even the most reserved patrons felt the warmth of the interaction, reminded of the simple pleasures music can bring. The piece grew more expressive, each note carrying emotion and intention. The pianist's fingers moved confidently, alternating between delicate melodies and bold chords. The audience responded with subtle gestures, soft sighs, slight nods, closed eyes, all indicators of deep engagement. The cafe, usually filled with background noise, was now a vessel for shared human emotion, where the music dictated the rhythm of thoughts and feelings. An elderly man near the counter sat quietly, eyes closed, a faint smile on his lips. Memories of youth, love, and long-forgotten moments surfaced with each note. Across the room, a young woman held her hands together, feeling a surge of inspiration and hope. The pianist's music was not merely entertainment. It was a bridge to emotion, a conduit for reflection and connection. Each listener was drawn into the story the keys were telling, finding personal meaning within the shared experience. The melody shifted, introducing faster passages that brought excitement and movement. The pianist's skill was evident, fingers flying over the keys with both precision and grace. The audience followed instinctively, leaning in, holding their breath, absorbing every detail. The cafe seemed to vibrate with the energy of the music, a quiet pulse of connection linking everyone present. Even those who had come seeking a simple cup of coffee were now part of the experience, caught in the spell of the performance. The music softened once more, offering moments of reflection and intimacy. Each note lingered in the air, resonating with the audience, allowing time for thought and feeling. A couple near the window exchanged a glance, hands brushing lightly, silently acknowledging the emotional impact of the piece. Nearby, a student jotted down notes in a small notebook, inspired by the delicate balance of technical skill and expressive emotion. The pianist had created more than music. They had created a shared moment of humanity. The child at the counter clapped softly, delighted by a sudden playful flourish in the melody. The pianist responded with another gentle, whimsical trill, acknowledging the joy without interrupting the flow of the piece. The audience smiled, some silently, some exchanging glances, appreciating the human elements woven into the performance. The interplay of skill, emotion, and interaction created a living experience, one that was unique to this evening in this space. The melody began to build again, rising with intensity and complexity. The pianist's fingers moved swiftly across the keys, creating waves of sound that lifted and carried the audience. The notes flowed seamlessly, conveying both power and subtlety. The listeners leaned in, captivated, feeling the energy of the music resonate within them. The cafe was alive with a quiet energy, a shared rhythm that linked hearts and minds. At a table near the entrance, a man closed his eyes, feeling the music unravel his stress and worries. The notes spoke to him, offering solace and understanding, a temporary escape from the demands of daily life. Across the room, a young woman whispered softly to her friend, expressing admiration for the pianist's ability to evoke such powerful feelings. Even the staff behind the counter paused, captivated by the beauty of the performance, fully present in the moment. The pianist maintained a careful balance, blending technical mastery with expressive depth. Each chord progression, each subtle trill was intentional, designed to carry the audience through a complex emotional landscape. The music rose and fell, sometimes tender, sometimes bold, always moving the listeners in ways that were intimate yet shared. The cafe had become a sanctuary of human experience, a place where the ordinary had been transformed into something extraordinary. As the piece continued, the pianist introduced gentle, reflective passages that allowed the audience to breathe and process the journey. Each note lingered, resonating with memories, hopes, and emotions unique to each listener. The young boy tapping his fingers quietly, the elderly woman recalling past joys, the couple holding hands, all were part of this shared moment. The pianist's careful control and deep sensitivity created a space where everyone felt included and seen. The music gradually built toward its final climax, increasing in intensity and emotional depth. The pianist's hands moved with speed and precision, yet every note was filled with feeling. The audience leaned forward, some closing their eyes, others watching intently, completely absorbed. The café vibrated with energy, subtle yet powerful, a testament to the impact of the performance. Every person in the room felt the connection, a quiet acknowledgement that they were part of something meaningful. In the final passages, the melody soared, rich and resonant, carrying the audience to a peak of emotional experience. The pianist guided the notes with care, ensuring that each moment was felt fully. Listeners held their breath, letting the music wash over them, feeling its power, beauty, and humanity. The café had become more than a place to drink coffee. It had become a space of shared emotion, where music transcended words and connected hearts. The pianist gradually brought the piece to a gentle close, allowing the final notes to resonate and fade naturally. The audience remained still, savoring the lingering sound, reluctant to break the spell. Soft whispers of admiration began to circulate, acknowledging the skill, emotion, and human connection the performance had created. People smiled at one another, silently sharing the profound impact of what they had just experienced. The child clapped quietly, delighted, and the parent smiled warmly. The elderly couple exchanged a gentle glance, a quiet acknowledgement of the memories and feelings the music had stirred. The young student continued to jot notes, inspired and energized by the experience. The pianist rested their hands lightly on the keys, feeling the satisfaction of a performance that had reached hearts and minds alike. The café slowly returned to its normal rhythm, but the energy and emotion of the evening lingered. People moved with a subtle lightness, their smiles and gestures reflecting the shared experience. The pianist felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the music had connected everyone present, leaving a lasting impression. The final piece had completed the journey, bringing together skill, emotion, and human connection in a way that would remain in the memories of the audience long after they left. The performance had ended, yet its impact was evident in the quiet reverence, the exchanged smiles, and the reflective expressions throughout the room. The pianist allowed a moment of stillness, taking in the shared experience, before acknowledging the audience with a soft nod. The evening had been more than a series of notes. It had been a journey through emotion, a connection between people, and a reminder of the power of music to touch hearts. As the audience began to leave, many carried with them a sense of calm, inspiration, and shared humanity. Conversations were quieter, steps lighter, and smiles more genuine. The pianist looked around the café one last time, sensing the collective gratitude and wonder that lingered. The music had created a bridge between hearts, a story told without words, a memory that would remain long after the final note had faded.